Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. Let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome back. I am your host Tia Hammer and today I am joined by Laura Barker, career coach and human resources professional. In today's episode, we are talking about how to be more effective in your job hunt. So let's get started. Hi Laura, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from Canada, from Toronto.
Oh, so nice. Is it like freezing cold over there at the moment?
You know what? We got a ton of snow over the weekend and it's about 6 or 8 degrees today. So everything is melting.
Oh my goodness. That is freezing. Well, it is for us. We don't get snow here. So, oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. So, your profession is quite multifaceted, as I've read. So for those who don't know you, do you mind explaining a bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Sure. So I'm a career coach and I came to it through human resources. I've done human resources for over 20 years and I loved it, but I could feel that I was reaching the end of the line. And even though I loved it, I wasn't getting what I wanted from it anymore.
Yeah.
So what I did was around the time I turned 40, I went into project management thinking, what are my favorite parts of HR? And I said, I love doing projects. And I did that and nope, that wasn't it either. What I realized is it satisfied aspects of my life, but not all of me. Yeah. And at one point someone said to me, you would be a great coach. And it was like it suddenly clicked.
Yeah.
And everything fell into place really quickly. I quit my project management job. I started my coaching studies. I took another HR job just before the pandemic. So I started the fall before the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
I told them at the outset, listen, my long-term goal is coaching. So I'm not here forever. Are you still okay with that? And they said, sure. So I went into that HR job and it was in the pandemic, which was a huge learning experience for everybody.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And came out of it the other side. And I quit last year to do coaching full time.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. So for those who are a little confused, do you mind explaining exactly what human resources is?
Mm-hmm. So human resources is a function you'll find in every business, every type of organization. It's the function of taking care of people.
Yeah.
And the term is changing over time. For me, human resources is still, it's the terminology I grew up with and I've used for most of my career. Some of the terms you might hear for human resources these days are talent and culture or people and culture. These are some of the other words that we're using now to describe the same function, which years ago was called personnel before it became even human resources.
Okay, yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, thank you for answering that. So we're going to get into some get to know the guest questions now. So this is where I'm going to ask Laura some more personal questions that aren't related to the topic. So let's talk about books. Are you a big reader? Do you some people don't like reading? Are you a Kindle person, book person?
Yes, I'm an avid reader. And my whole life, I read fiction until I started studying coaching, and then it was nonfiction. Which I love. I love because I'm drawn to the subject matter. It makes it easy to do. But my whole life, I was a fiction reader, And I could not
Cool.
understand why people would read nonfiction voluntarily.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, totally. Oh, cool. So do you
Yeah.
have any recommendations for us?
Yeah. In terms of books that I've read in the last few months that I recommend, one that's just a heartwarming read is called The Authenticity Project. Have you
Okay.
read it?
No.
Oh, it's a touching, sweet book. Lots of characters in it. Takes place in London. There's an Australian character in it uh,
Okay.
from Perth.
Oh, awesome.
It's just a lovely book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
for
that's so
fiction,
great.
I'd recommend that.
Yeah.
Another one is Louise Penny. She's a mystery writer. She's Canadian. And she's written, I think, 19 books.
Yeah, wow.
And she's got, don't quote me on the number, I might have that wrong. But I think it's 19. And she has a TV show on Amazon Prime now called Three Pines.
Mm,
So those are some nonfiction, some fiction that I'd recommend
cool.
to read. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. All right, so let's go into movies now. I'm a big movie buff. This is like my favorite
Well,
question. So I
ah,
love finding out what people watch, what they recommend. Are you a movie person or like a TV person?
I do both.
Okay.
Just on the weekend, I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah.
did you see it?
I have not seen it, but my last guest brought it up. And she was
Oh
like, I
my
can't believe you haven't
gosh.
seen this. Like you have to watch it. And I was like, I will get there. Like I
Yeah.
will get there.
Yeah. I don't want to tell you the plot because I went into it not knowing anything, and I almost think that's better to not
Okay.
know what to expect. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay.
Amazing.
All
Yeah.
right. I'll take your
Yeah.
word for it. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Do you have any other recommendations or do you have like a favorite genre or?
In terms of TV shows, I watch a lot of like murder mystery shows, like
I
thrillers.
love it.
Yeah, there was a show called Dark, a German show called Dark, which was terrific.
Oh,
But that's the kind of stuff when I just want to relax and not think too hard. Watching some sort of like murder mystery is so
the
much fun.
irony. I do not
Yeah,
find that kind of thing relaxing, like at all. I'm like,
and
I
really,
love
it's
hearing.
because I like understanding character, like what
Yeah.
motivates people to behave in a certain manner.
Yeah.
I'm always driven to those types of stories.
That's so great. Oh, I love that. All right. So my next question is who is your famous role model if you have one? See, not everyone has
Okay.
a famous role model, so that is a perfectly fine answer as well.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many people that I admire, but the big one really who's had such an influence over the last 20, 30 years is Oprah.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah.
she's huge. She's huge,
Yeah.
and you cannot underestimate the impact she's had in opening us up to discussions that people never used to have.
Yeah.
The things that we take for granted these days that people talk about more openly, she was starting to talk about it for the first time when she
Mm,
started doing that show. I think
yeah.
back in the 80s.
My goodness. Yeah, she's amazing.
It's
I
like,
love her. I like grew up watching her because my mom loves her
mhm,
too. And so I'm just
yeah,
like, oh, I love her. She's so amazing. Like she's such an integral part to like so many women. It's just like so
yes,
great. I love
yes.
it. All right. So next question is related to podcasts. Do
Okay,
you do you listen to podcasts first of all?
all the time. Yes,
Amazing. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So
I
what
like
are
to
some of your
listen to them.
favorites?
Yeah, I like to listen to them when I go for walks.
Yeah.
So some of the ones I like, there's an American woman named Mel Robbins. She's really good, really good. I was
Okay.
listening to one of hers today. She was interviewing the holistic psychologist. I don't know if you have heard of her,
No.
but you can find her on Instagram if you're interested. Anyway, so Mel Robbins, I recommend. I like people like Gabby Bernstein.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
And
yeah.
what kind of like
Eckhart
genre
Tolle.
is that? Like what kind of conversations do
Sure.
they have?
So the stuff that I'm drawn to are when I'm listening and going on walks are things around spirituality
Yeah.
or psychology. I
Cool.
like those things around personal growth, psychology, spirituality. Those are the types of topics that draw me in.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I love that. Yeah, I love podcasts. I'm like more of a I love like conversational and just like really relaxed, just like funny podcasts. I think it's because like I'm
Mhm.
on
Cool.
podcasts, like I
Yeah.
host
Like
because I host
Smartless?
like sorry?
Do you like Smartless?
I know I haven't heard it.
Oh, Okay, so it's three guys, Jason
Okay.
Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes.
Okay.
And they are so funny and so light. Each episode, they bring in a famous guest, but
Yeah.
the other two don't know who it is. So there's no researching, no preparation. These guys are
Oh, I
just
love
shooting the
this.
breeze, having conversations with
I feel like I've
famous
heard this.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Did you say it's called Smartless?
smart list. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Totally going to listen to that. That sounds so good. All right. Awesome. And my final question is related to courses. What is a course you have completed recently?
Oh,
What is like your most
what?
recent? Like it doesn't have to be like in the last couple of months.
Yeah, gosh, I do little things all the time, little courses all the time. But then the last big thing was my coaching certification,
Yeah.
doing my
Okay.
courses and then the training to get the certification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you do that?
So I did my in-person courses in 2019, and I did it really quickly because I already knew this as my career goal.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I finished it right before COVID.
Oh, so good.
So
Yeah.
So the certification process is online anyway, and you're meeting people around the world. So that's done via Zoom,
Yeah.
and you meet every week for that. So that was done during COVID, as
Yeah.
well as my coaching. That you have to do hours to get your certification before your exam.
Yeah.
That was done online as well.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to get into some more nitty gritty stuff now. So, as I already mentioned today, we're talking about job hunting and how personal productivity
Yes.
relates to this. But first, for our listeners, Laura, how would you define personal productivity?
My definition is pretty short.
Okay, hit me with it.
It is using your time wisely.
Amazing. That pretty much sums it up quite nicely. Yeah, I'm interested. Do you have different sort of conceptions of what productivity looks like for you? Because I know for some people, they're like, like sitting down on the couch watching Netflix and relaxing is still considered productive. Are you one of those people, or are you like productivity is purely like a work related thing?
So productivity, I think, can get conflated with output.
Yeah.
I think that to me, productivity, what does it mean to be productive? How are you productive? Well, productivity comes from prioritizing. It comes
Yeah.
from taking time to relax and to play. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but you actually need to relax in order to allow connections to be made in your mind.
Yeah. Totally.
So I totally recommend that for productivity. And then the other one, there's techniques and stuff like the Pomodoro method. I am sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah. I use it.
So
Yeah.
and those are like tools that you can use to help improve your productivity. Yeah.
Awesome. So, what do you think people get wrong when it comes to personal productivity?
I think they conflate productivity with output. I
Right.
think
Yeah.
that's the real challenge with productivity is that they think unless I have something to show for it, I have wasted my time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. I think I can definitely see that. And just because of, trends like hustle culture and you've got to be
Yeah.
working all the time and having like a side hustle and a side job and sort of maximizing yourself, it is about like you said, like how you use your time and how you have to use it wisely. But also it's like, that time doesn't always have to be like, you don't always have to be like on the grind, as people would say.
Yeah.
Like you have to take
Yeah.
time to look after yourself to make sure that you can therefore be productive later when you are sort of working. So let's talk about job hunting, because this is something that everyone has done. Whether or not you wanted to, it's something that someone's done. You either did it when you were 15, 20, 45, whatever. So over the course of your experience, how would you define job hunting or searching? And what are the elements to take into account in that procedure?
So job hunting in and of itself is more short-term focused. When we talk about job hunting, we're talking about going from one job or situation to another one.
Yeah.
Your career is longer term, requires a longer term vision. But job hunting in and of itself is, how do I get from A to B?
Yeah.
And so then the second part of your question was about, can you say that again,
Oh
Tia?
yeah.
What was the second
So
part?
like what
Yeah.
are the elements that sort of come with that procedure of job hunting?
Well, the first and basic part is updating your CV,
Yeah.
keeping it current. And I think you will talk a bit more about the CV shortly,
Yeah.
but like the CV is the starting point in terms of the application to different jobs.
Yeah.
Then there's different ways to apply for jobs through job boards, through networking. Um, so then there's the ways that you do it.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the actual process of the hiring. So you're a candidate who's submitted for a position, you get asked to do an interview, and more often than not, or actually most of the time, it's never going to be one interview. It's multiple interviews with different people, either one-to-one or one-to-two or a panel.
Yeah.
And it's after that point that you get hired.
Yeah, cool. So when people are searching for a job, do they need to have like a defined career path in mind? Do you think like when people are looking for certain roles, can they just kind of, look for stuff that they're interested in or stuff that is good money? Or do you think that they have to have like a more holistic approach in terms of like, this is the career path that I want. I have to look for jobs that align with this.
So I think what you're getting at is clarifying your why.
Yeah.
Why am I looking for this next job? Is it simply because I need a paycheck? Which is fair. I get it. Maybe it's
Yeah,
because I need
we've
to
all
earn
been
X
there.
amount of money and I don't really care if this satisfies me or not, but I know that I need to earn a certain amount of money or I want a certain status, job title, so that I can move to the next step of the ladder.
Yeah.
What I do find though is eventually people may start like that, but eventually they reach a point where it's not enough. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. The money, the status, people want to know that what they're doing has meaning.
Yeah.
And so,
Definitely.
in terms of, when you're looking at the next job versus the career, I do think satisfaction comes from knowing who you are.
Yeah.
And so, instead of thinking about the trouble with looking at just the next job sometimes is that we can be short-sighted.
Mm.
Uh, if you're thinking longer term, if you think longer term, it may be actually acceptable to take a job that isn't at a level that you necessarily want. It may be sideways on a lattice versus climbing a ladder, but
Yeah.
it's going to give you broader skills that will serve you down the road, knowing that your career, this is what you're ultimately looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can definitely concur with what you said because especially when you're studying or when you're younger and you're just sort of starting out, you have to sort of
Okay.
take these roles that you're like, okay,
Yeah.
this might not be like, this isn't what I want right now, but this is going to help me kind of get there and having that understanding of what you want. But coming up with that sort of definition of kind of what I want my career path to look like can be really stressful for people who are
Yeah.
sort of between jobs or not entirely sure what they think their career should look like. What advice do you have for people who are trying to sort of like narrow it down?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing, and I say this to, I have three kids who are in university right now and the end of high school. So I'm surrounded by young people who are trying to figure out what they're going
Yeah.
to do. And I think I wish someone told me, don't worry about where you're going to be at 50, at 40. You're going to have multiple careers in your life. So
Yeah.
don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. You think about and follow what interests you, where your passions are going now. And that's not flaky. That's not flaky to do so. Just recognize that you will grow and change. And so the career that satisfies you now will likely not satisfy you for your entire life.
Yeah.
And that's okay because we are meant to grow and evolve.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are very comforting words because I think there's that pressure. I don't know, because you choose like what university degree and stuff you want
Yeah.
to do when you're 18 years old. But at least that's
Yeah.
what you do here in
It's the same. It's
Australia.
the
And
same. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like so stressful. And I look back on it and I'm like, 18-year-old me did not know anything. Like
Of
she
course.
had no idea what she wanted to do.
Mhm.
She never had any
Mhm.
kind of work experience besides like
Yeah.
working at a little clothing store.
Yeah.
Like she
Yeah.
doesn't know. But you have this pressure that like you need to have it all figured out like now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think as you get older, only then do you kind of realize like, you know what, it's okay. Like I don't have to
Mhm.
have it figured out right now. I'm just going to make
Mhm.
this path and see how it goes. And it's going to take me to different places, which are usually really cool. So let's talk about like CVs and resumes and all that kind of stuff, because that's very
Mhm.
crucial. Like to get that
Mhm.
job interview, a lot of the
Mhm.
time you have to have that good resume, that good CV, and you know we
Mhm.
throw around all these different words like portfolio and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And these are essentially like basic representations of ourselves that we give to potential employers and recruiters. What do you think are the things that most people get wrong when it comes to CVs and resumes? And what are your tips to ensure that our portfolios are well sounding and efficient?
So in my HR career, I've probably looked at thousands of resumes in my lifetime. And what I'll say is the number one thing people get wrong on their resumes is they focus on their responsibilities and not their achievements.
Yeah, right. Okay. Interesting.
So, so I want people who are applying for jobs to consider me. Imagine I'm the recruiter. I'm looking at a few hundred resumes for a job opening.
Yeah.
So I'm spending probably about a minute looking at each resume. So you have 1 minute, and some people actually say it's 7 seconds that people make that judgment call on a resume, but I will take 1 minute to read that resume. So when you're telling me your responsibilities and not your achievements, what you're asking me to do is to do critical thinking and interpret what those responsibilities mean about how you're going to perform
Yeah. Okay.
in my company.
Yeah.
And when I'm meeting something that quickly, I don't have time for that. Realistically speaking, what I'm looking to do is tell me what you've done, because past results predict future behavior.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what I'm hoping to see is that you're gonna show that you've done certain things and you can reproduce the same thing at my company.
Yeah. So when you say achievements, like, can
Mhm.
you explain a little bit more what that means? Because like when I think of like
Mhm.
work achievements, I'm thinking like promotions or like
Mhm.
awards or stuff, but can they be things
Mhm.
smaller than that?
Oh, of course. So I told you I'm in HR and I've done all the parts of HR, but I started in my career focusing on compensation, benefits, and HRIS. So, using compensation as an example, if I were to just talk about responsibilities on my resume, and I say this as someone who's also done this myself, so I really do understand. I said, oh, well, I did compensation for 5 different countries. I helped create compensation structures for Canada, the US, Bermuda. This is all factual, and this covered my responsibilities. What it doesn't communicate is how well did I do it? Was I able to manage my time properly?
Yeah.
Was I effective? So a better way to have worded that on a resume would be to say, I calculated bonus payouts for over 40 hotels, over 150 calculations per hotel. I did it in 10 days with 95% accuracy.
Yeah, right. Okay. Wow.
So can you
Okay.
see the difference? Like if you're then
Yeah.
reading that, you'll, okay, that's solid. I understand what that means. She could do
Yeah,
that at my
definitely.
company.
Yeah, I can definitely see that clarity in understanding what someone could do, their achievements, and you're still like showing the responsibility aspect of it, but you're
Yeah.
showing kind of like how you did that and your output. In saying that, I think this is probably like one of the biggest problems that I have come across is in listing those
Sure.
achievements. I worry that like my resume is going to get too long-winded. What kind
Mhm.
of length of like resume do you think is the most appropriate? Because like you said, it's like, you only have a
Okay.
short amount of time to read
Okay.
this and that kind of thing. Like, what kind of length are we looking at here?
2 pages.
Right. Okay. And what exactly should those 2 pages look like?
Well, I know people who are earlier in their career are encouraged to do functional resumes. Do you know what a functional resume is versus
No.
a chronological? Okay.
No.
All right. So let's say just like you were coming out, you were going to university, you had the one job, and then you're starting to apply for jobs. What HR people are sometimes recommend is that you do something called a functional resume, which is where you focus not on your experience because you'd only worked at the one clothing store. Instead, what you're doing is you're focusing on your skills.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
functional resumes are often encouraged for people at early stages of their career.
Okay.
However, my experience with them is people get very frustrated with them because they're worried there's a lot of filler within the resume. So people don't really like them. So I would encourage people to always do chronological resumes. Even if you have one job to report, I would still encourage that you do a chronological resume starting. And I know this sounds obvious, but I had to do this with someone recently. You start with the most recent job and then you work your way backwards.
Yep. Yep. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you for that. So, is there any kind of things where people should be like, oh, I don't really need to put that on my resume? For example, you mentioned jobs and sort of doing that in a chronological order. If you had a job maybe for like, 6, 7 months, you were a gardener or something, should people still list that? Or should people sort of be like, oh, okay, I should really only list sort of like the big solid jobs that I think look good?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because this comes back to what are you looking for?
Yeah.
So if you think about the gardener job, are there any skills associated with it that apply or relate to the job you're applying for?
Yeah. Okay.
Because if you can translate, most people have transferable skills through their volunteering, through the things that they do just for pleasure. There are transferable skills that can apply in many workplaces. So I would say you can definitely use it if it applies to what you want to do.
Okay. Yeah. All
Otherwise,
right.
I
I
wouldn't
think,
get it.
right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. That makes great sense. Thank you. So let's talk about sort of college degrees and sort of when you are looking for a job straight out of college, all that kind of stuff. So there is this common misconception, and I don't know, I didn't see this as a misconception, but my researcher has told me that this is a misconception. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts because there's this apparent misconception that like your job has to match your like degree, what you qualified in. So what are your thoughts on this when it comes to searching for jobs that directly match your college majors? Like, do you think people coming straight out of college need to be looking for something that directly correlates to what they studied?
Well, put it this way, if they can find a job that actually correlates to what they studied in school, more power to them.
Right. Okay.
I think that's wonderful. I would say that what's more realistic is most people come out of university and what have they really learned? It's not so much that they've learned technical skills as they're learning how to think. They're learning more critical thinking skills. And then what happens when you enter the workplace is people will say to you, but what can you do? And the thing is, the answer is, well, I know how to think. I've got these critical thinking skills that come out of studying X or Y or Z. But I think that if you can find something that does match, I would say go for it. But I rarely find people who can find maybe engineering. That would be a subject matter where you could find more of a one-to-one relationship.
Okay.
But even then, I'm thinking about my last job and we have something. Do you guys have co-ops in Australia or internships? Maybe you might call it that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Internships.
Yeah. So, we had the last company I worked at was in food manufacturing, and we would hire these co-op or internships from a local university. And you would think that they'd have to be studying the same subject matter, but we alternated with each co-op from someone who did chemical engineering to someone who had studied chemistry instead. So it goes to show you that even within these university students who are doing these internships within their programs, it doesn't have to be a one-to-one relationship. If it is, great, but most of the time it's not. And that's okay too.
Yeah. So what advice would you have for college students who are trying to find a job, sort of coming straight out of university, and they're looking for something in the field, but obviously like they can't find something that is there because a lot of these fields are really like highly oversaturated. For example, if you're studying law, obviously the ideal situation is you graduate and you go to a firm and you become a trainee and you become a lawyer. But for people who maybe can't get a job in that field, what kind of process would you recommend they go through in terms of finding another job that still utilizes their degree but isn't sort of directly correlated?
Well, I mean, law is pretty specific in terms of the career path. I guess what I'd say is more often than not, we are moving into a society in which these really nice, clean career paths, like a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, they're not as common. And the truth is, kids who are growing up today, I can't remember the stats, so I don't want to give you the wrong one, but something like well over half of all the jobs that are going to be available to them don't even exist today.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't remember the stat, but it's a lot. And so what does that mean? Big picture, what it means is it's more important to have these soft skills, these transferable skills, and then the workplace can teach you any of the specific skills that you need related to the subject matter of your area.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So going back to sort of job applications and highlights, we've discussed sort of getting a job coming out of college. Now let's talk about sort of grade performance and academic achievements. Now, the older you get, the sort of more irrelevant this is. But when you're coming straight out of university, there are certain sort of expectations that you have good grades for the job that you want to go for. What are your thoughts on like extracurriculars, internships, and these other kind of academic experiences? Do you think that they really impact the strength of someone's resume?
So the quick answer, of course, is yes, it does. But I guess I want to go back to the talk about marks and grades. I don't think you necessarily have to be the top 10 person to get a job in life.
Yeah.
I say that as someone who's middle-aged and has worked with so many different types of people. Your marks are just one indicator of your success in life. So if you're not at the top of the heap, don't sweat it. The world needs all types of people. And sometimes I actually find people who had the highest marks aren't always the most adaptable in the workplace. So, I feel like I need to put that out there as we talk about the bigger picture here, because then you're talking about bringing in the extracurriculars. So certainly extracurriculars are important, but I also see padding in what people sometimes put on their resumes in terms of their extracurriculars because they think it will look good.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, interesting. So what do you mean by that?
Well, when you look at a lot of resumes, you start to get a sense for how do I say this? The best resumes reveal something about the person.
Okay.
And so when you're painting a picture of your extracurriculars, what I want to see is the story. I want to see the story of you, not something that feels manufactured.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is if you want to be, going back to your lawyer example, it would be great to see extracurriculars related to the type of law you wanted to do, the type of people that you wanted to work with.
Yeah.
That to me that's wonderful extracurriculars.
Okay.
Or if you want to work, if you were on a sports team and you want to work in a team environment, that's a great thing to highlight on a resume.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, great. That's good to know. All right. So we're talking about sort of internships and extracurriculars and all these sort of experiences.
Yeah.
When it comes to getting across your personality and showing, like the recruiter something about you that sort of makes you stand out a little bit more, you're sort of a little bit, just getting across who you are. Is there space to talk about sort of passions and interests? Do you think that's something that is worthwhile putting on a resume?
Yeah, I think for sure. For sure. It tells something about the person when you talk about the passions that you follow. But it has to be sincere. And what I guess what I mean by that is it seems clear after a while when you're looking through a resume if someone has written it for you or you've done it yourself to describe who you are.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind that the way you even design the resume tells me something about you.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So do you think it's worthwhile?
Use of color. Yeah. I was helping a guy who immigrated to Canada recently from Afghanistan in terms of what that resume could look like, for example, here in Canada versus the other countries in which he had worked. And, one of the things is for the type of job he's applying for, which is in graphic design, you want the use of color. You want something to express that you have an understanding and you have an eye for design. And that includes how you design your resume.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So do you think it's worthwhile people sort of investing in using different sort of softwares to design their resumes or things like Canva or stuff? Or is it just like a Word document is enough?
Gosh, I have gone the full gamut of this, from keeping it, white piece of paper, only use black and do a 12 font Times New Roman. I've gone from that to at the point I think we're at, which is I think people want to be more expressive in terms of how they design their resumes. And Canva is a great source. Etsy, actually, you can get resumes off of there as well.
Right. Oh, cool.
Designs anyway. And of course, there's always Microsoft Word. But the thing with Microsoft Word docs is everyone's using them. So it doesn't look that, when you get a lot of resumes, you're like, oh, I know which version he's using.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. So you mentioned before sort of having that padding and see, like you can tell if someone's written it or if they've had someone write it for them. And I just want to know, like, is it worthwhile, or do you think you can tell if a resume has been written that is tailored to the job? Because I think we hear a lot about this in terms of like tailoring your resume and your CV to the job that you want and making sure that everything kind of relates to that. Or should people just sort of be putting all their cards on the table no matter whether or not it's related?
Well, I think what happens is people start the job hunt and they're willing to be specific in terms of their applications, like tailoring their CVs to every place they apply. And then if things don't happen in the time frame that they're hoping for, they start throwing the spaghetti against the wall and sending out the same CV to every company. Yeah. So, and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So the trouble with using the same resume again and again and not customizing it to the job you're applying for is, again, we come back to differentiating. The person reading the resume, what I feel like sometimes is, does this person actually even want this job? Did they even look at what I put in my job description? Because the person who really cares is going to try and mimic some of the language that's used in the job description. They're going to mimic some of that language in the CV. They will perhaps write a cover letter that addresses the key needs within the job. And those are the ones I take more seriously because they're telling me they care, that they actually do want a job at my company.
So now that we've had a pretty good overview of what job hunting looks like and what it's about, what would you say are your top 3 tips for the most effective job hunting process?
I think being clear on what you want is the main thing you need to
Yep.
do.
Yep.
Everything else falls from there. But um, while it sounds obvious, when I talk to people, many times they're not clear on what they want. And so what happens is they look at a job board, they see a job posting, and they say, "Oh, I think I could do that. I think I could do most of the stuff there." And so what's behind that is there's a reactivity. They're trying to meld themselves to that job opening and not necessarily thinking, is this actually what I want?
Yeah.
And so my recommendation is to be clear on what you want, because then what happens is you're limiting the number of places you're applying to. So you're not wasting your time sending out 80 CVs a day. You might be doing 8. I'm just giving you numbers here, but
Yeah.
you're not sending out a ton. You're focused in that. It also helps you in terms of your networking. When you're telling people that you're looking for another job, when you know what you want, you can be really clear. I really want a job in compensation, and I want to work for an international company.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
really clear. People, they either have something or they don't, but at least they know what you really want.
Yeah.
So that's the second part. And then the third part would be, again, it makes it easier to communicate your message. Whenever you're having conversations, when you're on social media, when things come up, when you know what you want, you become clearer in how you communicate it out. And that's more
Yeah.
effective in
Yeah,
terms of job
definitely.
hunting.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you've said is really accurate in terms of just making sure you understand, what you want and what you're looking for and kind of what
Yeah.
your needs are. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this idea of finding jobs that work with your lifestyle, because I feel like this sort of
Mhm.
new generation that's coming through, it's less about, fitting yourself to the job and more about finding the job that fits you and fits your lifestyle. How flexible do you think people should be, and how willing do you think they should be when it comes to a job in terms of oh, maybe I can be a bit more flexible on the pay or the hours or all that kind of stuff? Or do you think people should, know exactly what they need and what they want and stay strict to that?
So, T, are you talking about Gen Zs who are coming up in the workplace now? Is that the
Yeah,
group that
sure.
you're?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So with Gen Zs, and again, we're speaking on a macro level. I find them quite different from millennials as a group.
Mm.
So what I find with Gen Zs is, one, they're hard workers and they really like being in the office. I actually think they want the experience of connecting and seeing how the business environment works. That's one of the things I've observed coming out of the pandemic. And it's been harder for them to start developing that network, to start developing those business relationships, because there's been so much working from home, so much remote work, which
Yeah.
you still can connect, but everything takes longer when you're doing it online.
Yeah.
It's not that you can't; it takes longer. So I would say that for the Gen Zs who are coming into the workplace, what they're looking for is to find companies that align with their values,
Yeah.
and they're not willing to wait and see if the company is going to change. If the company doesn't match their values, they'll leave. And there's no, even if they don't have another job, that's how strongly they want to be working for companies that align with who and what they represent, and the things that they're doing to the environment and the ways that they're giving back to the community.
Yeah. Do you think that having those kind of ideals is too unrealistic, sort of in the job hunting world that we're in now, or?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I totally understand where they're coming from,
Yeah.
and what we need is a whole movement of people to be more like this. Have you heard of B corporations, for example?
I don't think so. No.
Well, I think it's an American designation, but the last company I worked at had it. It's a very rigorous process to to become a certified B Corp, and it's about people, processes, and the way the way you work and how it interacts with the environment
Oh,
that you're
wow. Okay.
minimizing. It's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
for example, for job hunters, like for example, what I did in my last job hunt is I specifically went on the B Corp website to find companies that are B Corp certified because that aligned with my values.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
And so, yeah, yeah. So I think that I don't think it's unrealistic. I think there's nothing wrong with having values. I think I think companies say that they have values. Uh, all companies these days, all companies have values, and they're fully integrated. I say this as an HR person. It's fully integrated into performance management and all these other aspects. And hiring. When I'm hiring someone, for example, I'm looking and asking questions to find out if they have the values that we're looking for as well. So it is
Yeah.
actually a two-way street
Yeah.
for the person applying and for me as well as the recruiter. I want to make sure that there's a match there
Yeah.
because
Okay,
otherwise you're
great.
not going to fit in.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
definitely.
not.
So you mentioned before sort of a practice that you do. So we're going to go into the practice habit debrief section of the show now. So this is essentially where we ask the experts what it is that they do personally that sort of helps them, for example, be more effective at job hunting. So what is something that you do, Laura? Like when you're looking for a job, when you were hunting for a job, what was a practice that you did to help you be more effective?
I think for me, the best thing that I have learned is I come back to what I talked to earlier, getting clear on what I want. I spent too many years being that person throwing the spaghetti against the wall and then getting frustrated that things weren't working out.
Yeah.
But that was not a recipe for success. So that's why I want to encourage people, don't do what I did. um, I do what I learned later on in life. But if you could save yourself that time and do it from the outset, you're so much farther ahead.
Yeah.
So how do you get clear on what you want? It starts with knowing who you are.
Yeah.
So some of the
Definitely.
practices that I do that help me figure out who I am is identifying what my values are. I do something called morning pages. Do you know what morning? Have you heard of morning pages?
I like journaling.
Julia Cameron. Okay, so
Okay,
this
no.
woman wrote a book. I think she wrote it in the '90s, like '92, and millions of people have done this program. And her idea is to spark the creative process. And so what the idea is, every day you start your day by writing 3 pages. That's your morning pages. 3 pages, handwritten every day.
Okay.
And so the idea is before you get into your day, before you have all the distractions, you're starting fresh because you can set the tone for your day versus a reflection. Like if you do a diary at nighttime, you can only
Yeah.
reflect on what's already happened.
Yeah.
In the morning, you can anticipate. So this comes back to prioritizing and getting clear about what you want. When you start the day like that, you move forward with more direction as
Yeah.
opposed to aimlessness.
So is it just like
So
3 pages of like writing like your feelings and thoughts and whatever it is, or is there like
I mean,
specific sort of actions?
yeah. So she has a book. It's called The Artist's Way. And so it's a 12-week program. And then I did it a while ago, but I just kept it up afterwards. And the idea is really looking at every day, what do I want more of? What do I want less of? What am I feeling frustrated about? And it sounds silly, but the truth is you can only complain so much when you're writing stuff out. And eventually you start coming up with solutions through the actual act of writing because you
Yeah,
got three
right.
pages that
Yeah.
you're doing. And however time, I mean, it could be half an hour, it could be 45 minutes or an hour. It depends. Sometimes some days go fast and some days they don't. But her point is don't tie productivity with how you feel. Just
Yeah.
do it. You just do it.
That's
So
great.
that's the idea behind it. And to support that, she has something called Artist State, which is about filling the well with new ideas, images, thoughts. And another way to look at it is to see it as, when we talked at the beginning about relaxing and being playful, that's what we're getting at here, is you need that
Yeah.
time of not doing any thinking or work to
Definitely.
allow those connections to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think you really need that downtime. And I really like that
Mhm.
doing it in the morning instead of at nighttime, because it
Yeah.
does set the tone. Like you said, you've kind of
Yeah.
allowed yourself to know how you're going to feel that day, what you want to accomplish, all that kind of stuff. But I want to ask, do you face any challenges when you do this practice?
Yes, which I already touched on. And that is, some days you just have nothing to say.
Yeah, for three
Like
pages,
you're
that's a
waking
lot.
up and you're just like I feel good, or I
Yeah.
just, I'm empty. I'm empty. And
Yeah.
so what she says is to literally write, I have nothing to say. And you keep writing it until eventually a thought comes
Yeah.
in, and you're back at it again.
Yeah.
And it's again another way of not tying what we talked about with productivity, output, that whole discussion. It's a way to move through it so you don't get stuck.
And how often do you do this?
Every day.
Every day. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
I don't
But
think I do.
again, I'm not trying to, I'm not an absolutist. So, I'm living in Canada and we ski on the weekends.
Oh, so
Ski
nice.
days are super, super busy. So on the weekends, I'm not going to do it. It's enough to get like all the gear out the door to go
Yeah, oh my
skiing.
goodness.
I am not going to, stress about writing an hour before I go out for a day of skiing.
Yeah. So do you set up a certain time to do this, or does it just sort of become a
When
part
you
of
wake
your...
up.
Yeah, okay. So you have like a
Yeah.
morning routine that sort of
Yep.
surrounds
I
this.
have a
Yeah.
little nook, that I
Oh,
only use to
yes.
do that writing.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. Oh, awesome. And how do you think this practice impacts your productivity?
That's huge. So one of the things I do as a career coach is I write a weekly newsletter.
Oh,
And
cool.
I'm not going to lie, I was a little concerned before I started. Can I do this every single week? Can I be doing this newsletter? Which I've actually subsequently made a video version of it. I also do a podcast of it. So
Oh, wow.
it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot. But where does it start? It starts with a newsletter, which is the written. And doing these morning pages has helped me to see that I don't have to catastrophize it. I just do it. It's like anything else. My creativity is not dependent on my mood. I just do it. It's just a part of life. And the more you
Yeah.
practice it, the easier it gets.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And do you combine this with another practice, or is this is there something that you do to sort of improve the effects of it, or?
Well, the things I do are related to spirituality. So I'm not sure that this is the audience for that,
Yeah.
but I would do other readings in the morning that support me to kind of get me going in terms of my thoughts from my
Yeah,
morning
right.
pages.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you for answering those questions. So, we're going to go into some audience questions now. So, I've got one here that asks, what do you think is a presentation of yourself on social media? And do you think it's important when it comes to job searching?
Yeah, I think that depends on what you're looking for. It's like that example I gave you of the graphic designer. It is more important for a graphic designer to present something visually that's appealing than, let's say, a chemist who's applying for a job.
Yeah.
So I would say the video would be very advantageous in a medium in which you need to be presenting yourself regularly, for example. But if you're not, if you're someone who's, well, let's say is going to do lab work, I don't see that there's a value associated with doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Because I hear a lot about when it comes to people who are in marketing or social media, or they just want to work in communications, and
Mhm.
having this pressure that like every aspect of your life has to reflect your passion for this, your capability. Like if they go onto your Instagram, are they going to see your work reflected in that? Do you think people need to consider having that upkeep when it comes to social media in terms of it being able to reflect their capabilities, or is that something more personal?
Well, okay, so for social people who are working in social media and marketing, I would say doing an about me video, for example, would be more important than that the chemist in the
Yeah.
chemist example,
Yeah.
because of the medium they've chosen to work in. Uh, and so the other part you were asking about was,
It's kind of like that image and perception. Like, do they need to like be able to demonstrate their capabilities on social media? Like, let's say they're trying to like get a job as a social media coordinator for some kind of, newspaper or something. Does their personal social media need to reflect their capabilities as someone who can
yes,
build followers and all that kind of stuff? Yeah.
yes. I would say in that instance, yes, because in this day and age, recruiters are going to be looking you up on your social media.
Yeah.
And in particular, if you're applying for a social media job, what I want to see is that there's consistency between what you're telling me you can do and what I'm actually seeing. So in this age of social media, everyone looks up people all the time. It's quite different from when I started. I mean, now with LinkedIn, everyone shares photographs. But when I started in HR, it was such a no-no. You would never, ever share a photograph of
Really?
yourself when you're applying for a job. You would
Yeah.
never do
Wow.
that. It would be considered, in fact, it would be considered discriminatory.
Yeah. Okay.
But with LinkedIn, and now it's everywhere. And so for most people, when they're applying for a job, I will look up their social media profile just to see what are the types of content that they're posting about. If someone applying for a social media job, I think that would be particularly important.
The next question we have is, do you consider social media as a place where you can find a job or somewhere a potential employer can find you?
Yes to both.
Okay.
And potential employers can find you through that, and you can also find jobs through that as well.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
just keep in mind that social media is like a job board. It's just one lens. Um, Depending on the social media tool that you're using, see it as looking at one job board versus another. You're only getting slices of what's available in terms of job opportunities.
Yeah. What advice would you have when it comes to the actual looking for the job process? And because there are all those different places and all those different
Mhm.
platforms that you can go to look for a job. There's Seek, Indeed, people use LinkedIn, some people looking on social media, or directly on the work, like the employer's website. How
Mhm.
should people sort of tackle this? Because there's a lot to look at, trying to narrow it down and sort of actually find what you're looking for and also not waste time. What sort of
Mhm.
advice do you have for people who are trying to sort of refine that process?
Yeah. Well, we've already talked about getting clear on what you want. So let's start with that. You're already clear on exactly the type of job you're looking for. Now you just have to find it.
Yeah.
The best way to find jobs is through people. It's not going to be through a website. It's not going to be through a job board, and it's not going to be through social media. All of those are great tools, and I'm not dissuading you from using them. But the best jobs are going to be from talking to somebody where you get a sense of what's the company they're working for? What's it like working there? Is this the type of place I want to work at? And when you know what you want, because you're clear on your own messaging, you're going to be finding more alignment and therefore finding a job that actually suits you better over time. So I actually think the best way to find a job is through networking.
Amazing. Well, that leads me nicely into our open mic section. So, this is essentially the part of the show where the guests get to talk about anything that they're passionate about. It doesn't have to be related to the topic. So, I'm going to hand it over to Laura now. What would you like to talk about?
I would just want to build on that discussion about networking. I think that it is the differentiator. And I know that there's a lot of anxiety around networking.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
People, oh my good gosh, you know, I was asking and doing an informal poll to see people's perceptions of networking. And some of the stuff I heard was transactional, inauthentic, exhausting. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of,
Comes with a lot of
and
baggage.
yeah, there's a lot of baggage. And then you add to that the effects of the pandemic, where people were forced into isolation and didn't have time to practice these social skills, and they've lost them somewhat. There's a lot of angst around
Yeah.
networking. And so as we start to re-engage, I do want to encourage people to look at this again, because of everything I said. All these other tools to find jobs are just slices. To get the whole picture, the only way you'll get the whole picture about a job in a company is by talking to someone who works there.
Yeah.
Hey, what's it like
Totally.
working at your company? Like, is this something I'd be interested in doing? Like, what's the company culture like? Do they actually live their values, or do they just talk about them once a year? Like,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah,
kind of stuff you
definitely.
really want to know when you're applying for a job.
Yeah. I can
And
definitely
you know,
concur with that.
even if you're talking to a friend who doesn't have a job opportunity, what I have found is when you're clear on what you want, they may know somebody that comes up in a conversation they have
Yeah.
that could recommend you. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's not lost.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think I've found a lot of my jobs that way in terms of just networking. And a lot of time it happens by accident. But the moments where I have done it on purpose, like
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, it has led to something. And like networking
Mhm.
isn't always going to, like, you're not going to always have coffee with someone and then they're immediately going to offer you a job. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
a
no,
lot
no,
of the time,
no.
that's not how it works. But it is,
Yeah.
like you said, sort of having people know what you want and what you love and what
They
you're
just,
looking for. And so when those kind of things come up, they're like, oh, well, like Laura really likes
mhm.
this and she really
Yeah.
wants to do this. I'm going to give
Yeah.
her a call and get her there. And I
Mhm.
think that's really crucial. And I think sort of coming out of university, that is one of the most important sort of things that you hear a lot
Mhm.
about. And it can be sort of anxious and it can be a little bit
Mhm.
scary, but it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be if you go and do it with a friend. Like the way that I got one of my other jobs is I went to like a event with a friend that was for her because she's a musician, but I was like, oh, I'll
Yeah.
go because I'm like a music journalist, and ended up talking to someone who talked to someone who referred me and ended up getting this awesome job. And it's cool and it just
See,
happens like
there you
that.
go.
Yeah. And it just happens naturally. But it
Mhm.
is sort of about, yeah, knowing what you want and just having the confidence just to actually put yourself out there and having that self-esteem and believing in yourself. So yeah, it's definitely an important aspect.
I think if people understood that in the end, networking is simply about making connections. And ultimately, as humans, all we want to do is build relationships. That's what we're looking to do again and again, is to build relationships. And when you bring it down from the whole concept of networking to something more personal like that, it's more intimate and more accessible to think, I'm just looking to connect with one other person. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you can learn so much. Like I've learned so much just through
Yes.
networking, just from like meeting people who work in fields I'm interested in.
Right?
And sometimes you find out things where you're like, oh, it's probably not actually what I want to do. And you can learn more about
Yes.
that. And it's great. It really helps you
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
refining. So yeah, for people listening, if you're struggling in terms of figuring out kind of what you want, what you're interested in, then ask people who do it,
Yes.
because then you're going to learn kind of what it is and the hours and the lifestyle and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff that comes with it. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for answering all of those questions. That brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you so much, Laura, for being here. It's been such a pleasure and we've learned so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It was really fun. The time went like that.
Exactly. So, for those who want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
They can check out my website, laurabarkercoaching.com.
Amazing. Awesome. We'll have Laura's details and the link in the description below. But thank you again so much, Laura, for being here. We've had such a great time. And to our listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys. You have been listening to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps others find us and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Tia Harmer. Thanks for tuning in.